Good morning. Looks like our attendance today is 70. Last Sunday we had 84. A year ago today we had 74. If there's anyone here that considers themselves a visitor, we welcome you here and invite you back anytime you can be with us. We are always glad to have visitors with us. Do we have anyone that has had a birthday or an anniversary and wishes to contribute to the birthday bank? No one? Okay, well, here this morning at the church, they sent out one card. It was a get well card to Rodney and Joanne Wright. I guess they have summer colds and they did not want to be around, so they are stayed at home today. Okay, today is the last Sunday of the month, so we will be taking up an offering for Joe Belzer's ministry right after services this morning. Here at the church at 2 o'clock, there will be a bridal shower for Cheyenne. And it says, bring a recipe to share with the bride. Community Fair Work Cleanup Meeting, that is August the 30th at 5 p.m. Community Fair Kitchen Food, that will be August 30th at 6 p.m. So come and help clean up the community building, the area before the fair gets here. And okay, do we have any announcements this morning? Anyone? Ryan?
Youth group is tonight at 6 p.m. I think it's at 5. School started. It's at 5 p.m. here at the church, 5 to 7. And I just wanted to tell you real quickly about Shiloh. We went there last, I guess it was yesterday, and we spent the whole day there. Me, Susan Guffey, Carolyn Albertson, and Debbie York. And I just wanted to show you a couple of pictures, if I can pull this off. Is it the VisioCast display? Okay. I was actually really moved by this place. How long have we been supporting them, Larry? Do you know? A long time. More than 10 years? Huh. Really? Well, I'm trying to get this to work. Maybe it will or maybe it won't. I don't know. So far not working. Oh well. I'm going to look at it quick, see if you can figure this out. I just wanted to show it to you because I could not believe it, honestly, when I got there. It was not what I thought it would be. Oh well, maybe we'll do it in another year. So basically, how many people do you think were there? Where's Debbie? Where'd she go? She gone? I think there was 150 or 100 or what? Okay, 300 probably. So when you pull in, you see this beautiful lake, and then they have a dock, or all the kids go down there and they swim. They jump off this dock. They swim in this big lake. They have a pavilion on the left, and on the right, what I was wanting to show you in these pictures is they built this building specifically for guests to come visit. So inside the building, they have a real nice kitchen. They have a big center where they have all these tables where you can eat. And off to the side, they have a girls' bunk room and they have a boys' bunk room. So you can bring a church, you can bring a youth group, and you can stay overnight. You can stay a couple days. You stay in these bunk rooms. They have real nice showers right there, and you can help them out. You can cut firewood. They're building a new house. I was wanting to show you their new house that they're building. They're building this new house. They're starting out with a new kind of floor plan where they're having the kids have their own rooms. In the past, they always had like 2 or 3 or 4 students per room. And the parents' room would be in the middle, and they would have the boys on the right and the girls on the left. They'd have like 4 boy rooms on the right, 4 boy rooms on the left, and then they would put 2 or 3 kids in each one. And now they're doing individual rooms. So every girl has her own room, like 10 by 10 bedroom. She has her own closet, and there's 5 rooms down the row. So there'll be 5 boys' rooms, And then there is a bathroom and a shower and a laundry room. So all 5 of those boys share a laundry room. They learn how to do their own laundry. Pretty cool, huh? I didn't know kids could do their own laundry. So then the girls, all the way down, there would be 5 girls' rooms. Each girl has their own room. They have their own bathroom, their own shower, and their own laundry room. The parents' room's in the middle. You can only access it through the parents' room. So boys can't go to girls' side, girls can't go to boys' side. But you can come out in the main living area where the living room is, and the kitchen, and the dining room. They have this huge dining room tables. And I was just so moved because they brought back a lot of the kids who had left there that were in college now. And to see them reuniting with their parents was just so cool. They got up and they gave probably 45 minutes worth of testimonies. And I want to tell you, it was a very moving thing. So when you first pull in, off to the left is this pavilion right here. And this is this new center I was talking about that they built. Wow, it looks different up there. Okay. And so that's the pavilion. The lake's on the right. This is the lake with that dock where they play. They have these swimming, they call them lily pads. Lily, you would like that. And this is the new building they built. Inside, it looks like this. I mean, it is super cool, super nice on the inside. The kitchen's way up front. You all can eat there. I'm showing you this because I'm planning this summer to take a group. It would be awesome if a large majority of this church could go. We got to go see this. So this is the back wall. They got some couches there. This is the bunk room. Cool little bunks we could all sleep in, you know. Sounds great, huh? Randy would probably snore. And then they have this tent. They set up this tent so we could all hang out in this tent. This is where they did their presentation. They had like right up here, you can't see it, the mic was here. And this was packed full of people. This was probably half an hour before they started. On beyond it is one of their houses there. You can barely see it. I'll show you another picture. So they just built this basketball court. They're in the process of building this court. So they're going to have a goal on each end. The kids are so excited about having a full court basketball court. And you can see here, so this is the new house that they're building. It's got a 2-car garage. In back of that garage, they have like cold storage for all their food. It's studs right now. They're getting ready to hang all the drywall, okay? So they've been having groups come helping them build this. So they're to the point they've got the electric wired in and they're getting ready to hang all the drywall. And so then there's this is what the old houses look like. Okay, so there's like 4 of them right now. The parents would stay in the 2, where the 2 middle windows are, that's the parents' room, and then left, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 4 rooms on each wing. Okay, and then all the living area is down at the bottom. And they have this really cool playground set. Look at that playground set. I mean, if you're under like 18, that would be fun, you know. Jake, okay. I took this for my wife. Okay, this is their job board that they had in the house, okay? So they put their kids' chores, they made this cool window. So they tape their chores back to the back of this, and then they write the kids' names. You can see they rotate girls' laundry every day. They have a different girl do laundry every day. Your kids can do their own laundry right through there, see? And then they have weekend chores, and they rotate, so each kid does a different chore every day. They don't get stuck doing the same chore. I thought that was pretty cool what they did. So this was the food they prepared. This is a couple of the house parents. This is their school. Down in the bottom, they have a school. Probably 25% of their kids go to school there. The others go to public school, kind of based on where they're at. And so they have desks there where they do their work. This is another part of their school. They have a foosball table, bathrooms down there. Just super cool place for them to meet. And this is Mark. So this is kind of our main contact. I got to know Mark just a little bit, and I'm hoping to get him to know him more. But if you want to contact Shiloh on your own, if you want to give to Shiloh on your own, I would encourage you to do that. These are like-minded people. These are just like us. These are folks just like us that are reaching out to help a lot of. I think they probably had around 40 kids there, I think they said, something like that. And so probably 10 students per house. They had 4 or 5 houses. And there's a lot of needs, I think. And I think that they're really looking forward to partnering with us more and more in the future. And I hope so even more than we have. I was just moved by it, to be honest with you. Just going through the adoption process and all that happens with that, to see all these kids coming and these people pouring into them, it was quite moving. And to see these kids in their 20s coming back and testifying to these parents, it was a neat deal. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about that trip, and I hope that in the future maybe more of us can go. It was pretty cool.
Thank you, Ryan. Like he said, or like we said, we've supported that for, I would say, at least 30 years. 73. Yeah, that's been a few more than 30, I think. I hate to admit it.
There was a couple that they honored yesterday, and they had a lot of their kids there to do the testimony that Ryan was talking about, and they were celebrating 40 years with Shiloh,
40 years, yeah.
the Blues.
Yeah. How many house families is there down there now? Does anyone know?
5, I think.
5?
And then they have a house that's just for them to rest. So they could take all their students to that house. They keep them for a day or two while the family goes and has
Takes a break. Yeah, and sometimes that is needed. Do we have any more announcements this morning? I think I've got one more up here. Okay, this Wednesday, August the 30th, 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock is the last Wednesday lunch at the community building this year. It says bring your own lunch and drink. So if you want to meet down to the community building, I think they have a good time. Bring your own lunch. That is between 11 and 1. It's just to kind of get together and discuss everything, I guess. Is there anything else? If there's nothing further, I'll turn the service over to Mike.
Good morning. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing with us all about that. It's very great to see how God is working through other people to take care of the orphans and the people that need homes. And we have supported it, so that's a wonderful thing. Today I want to start a series on animals. And one of the things I thought about since I've been living here, I'm a city boy. All right? I've had dogs and cats, and I had a parakeet named Blue Boy and a hamster that got loose and couldn't find him for a couple years. It lived in the basement. I've had animals. I remember when we first got married, I had an encounter with an animal. Deb and I were first married. We lived in this house that was kind of a bad house. And I heard something in the middle of the night. I'd set a trap because we had some mice. And whatever I caught was bigger than a mice. And it was thump, 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 thump. And I, like the brave man I was, I come running out of the bedroom. And there was this, I don't know what it was. It was bigger than a mouse, probably like a mole or something. And it wasn't, and I got my hammer out. Oh dear. My wife thought, what is happening? And I was being the man of the house, of course, learning how to do that. Years later, we lived in Glenwood, and I was sleeping upstairs, and somebody was in the house. I mean, seriously. You know what it's like. I woke up, I could hear them walking around downstairs. So what do? So I went to the top of the steps. Our bedroom was upstairs. And I said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to get out of this house before I come down with my gun. I didn't have a gun. I had a hammer again. Had lots of hammers. And about that, I thought, what am I going to do? And I started to go down the steps, and here's my dog running down the bottom of the steps. And I thought, Tyson, it's so good to see you, buddy. So I used to keep my dog in the garage, and evidently I hadn't got the door between the garage and the house open or shut quite as well as I should. But I was a city boy, and since I've been living here, I have really enjoyed animals. And many of you, how many were in 4-H? Any of you been in 4-H? And how many of you farmers have cattle and sheep and all these things? And I thought to myself, you know what? Animals say a lot about God. And so when I first came here, I was just preaching the morning service. I preached a little bit about animals. I don't know how many of you remember that. A lot of you probably weren't in that early service, but I thought about speaking throughout the Bible about the glories of God and how he has created animals and just kind of go from that. And so today's more of an introductory message about animals and so on. And I believe that Christians, we should hold a special appreciation for animals because the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 1 that God created the heavens and he created the earth, including living creatures. God created them. And it's amazing to me that God created animals like he did. It's such a marvelous thing he did. I've often said about how you can tell a lot about God by what he has done. One can learn a lot about a person by examining what he or she creates. For example, reading a book. How many of you like to read? I love to read. Reading a book reveals a lot about the author. And listening to somebody's music, like my father used to listen to a lot of classical music, you can learn a lot about the musician by what they have created. You can tell a lot about a person by examining their products. You can tell about a great painter, like a Rembrandt or somebody else. They can look at the brush strokes and they can tell this is a fake and this is the real thing. You learn a lot about a person by looking at what they create. Did you know that you can tell a lot about a person by driving by their house and looking at their lawn? I remember when I was preaching at another church years ago when I was in Bible college, that the farmers would talk, it was a farming community, and they'd talk about, this guy's got straight rows. This one's kind of looks like he's been drunk. You know, this one has no weeds in their rows. And this one, you know what I'm saying. You can tell a lot about people. And the same is true with the God of the universe. While we learn about God primarily through his word and through the Bible, we can also study the character of God by observing the things that he has created. For example, in Psalms 104 and verse number 24, the Bible says, "How many are your works, O Lord? In wisdom you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures." The world is full of your creatures. I stood there the other day when I was thinking about this message, and I was looking out my back door that looks out over my back porch. Some of you who've been to my house know what I'm talking about. And I saw hummingbirds. There was a couple of hummingbirds flying around, even in the rain. Then I looked further. We have some turkeys that run through our backyard about the same time every day. We started off, they had a bunch of little ones that followed them, and pretty soon the little ones got big, and now we have a parade that just walks right through there. It's great. A city boy, I hadn't seen that before. We see sparrows. We saw sparrows and things like that in town. And then I look, and there's Nathan, my boy Nathan's horses. This morning when we got up, Sarge was standing right by the fence looking at us. I said, "Good morning, Sarge. I hope you're having a great Sunday." And the other three horses were clear down the road. And I said, "What's wrong, buddy? Are they talking about you again behind your back?" You know, I guess I'm getting a little goofy, I guess. Don't answer that question, but, and I love animals. So you farmers, you work with animals all the time, and we're going to talk a little bit about how God has described things in his word through based on animals that he's used in the word of God. First point I want to make this morning is that animals belong to God. When you see a watch, how many have a watch on your arm? What do you realize when you see a watch besides what time it is? Somebody made that watch. Somebody made that watch. There was a watchmaker. So I understand that God has made many, many things. If you ever see a kangaroo, at birth, a kangaroo is no bigger than a dime. And when the kangaroo is born, it falls out of its mother's womb, it hits the ground. That kangaroo gets up and crawls up the fur on the mom, and finds this thing called a pouch. Gets in this pouch, and then it's there for several weeks until it's big enough to live outside that pouch. And I thought to myself, could a tiny kangaroo that would die if it didn't know about that, how did he learn that? How did that kangaroo know that just above him, a couple feet, there's a pouch and I'm supposed to go up there? And how do you let the other kangaroos know about this? And how did my mama kangaroo end up with a pouch anyway? Wouldn't you ladies like that if you were born with a pouch and you wouldn't have to carry a purse? I mean, it's a, yeah, don't answer. And in fact, they had to communicate that from generation to generation, from the beginning of time to our time, but yet they knew that. What does that say about the maker of these animals? It's an amazing thing. Have you ever heard of the expression blind as a bat? Well, actually, bats are blind, pretty much blind. They can barely tell between light and dark. And so when the dark bat flies in the dark cave, he can easily, even though he can't see, he can manipulate and move around stalactites and all of this and caves and go quickly. And they emit something called sonar. They emit sonar, and it's a very high-pitched frequency that they have. They have big ears, so they can hear the sonar come back, and they can tell if there's a little bug right there that they can grab, and so on. And they have developed this. Who taught them that? How did they know that? Who made them that way? The maker of all creation did that. And he did that very, very well. You know how many centuries it took for man to figure out sonar? I mean, it took us, our scientists or whoever discovered sonar that we use today in our submarines and so on, and yet from creation throughout all these thousands of years, these bats, they understood this. And when you think about migration of birds, the hummingbird is the smallest of all birds, and it flies as far north as Maine to the Gulf of coast for winter. Some hummingbirds fly over 500 miles across the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico into South America. And how did they learn to do that? And then they come back to your yard, maybe the next year, or whatever. Jolene, about a year ago, she had on Facebook a picture of some turkeys that they were trying to get in her hummingbird feeder. And the caption was, "Maybe I'm feeding them too much." Those big old turkeys. The golden plover. Have you ever heard of that bird? Golden plover. I don't think we have them around here. But they nest in Canada, and they nest in the tundra in Alaska. And when they migrate down the East Coast all the way to Central America. From Alaska or from Canada. And the interesting thing about it is that when they come back, they go a different route. They go a little bit to the west and up through the Midwest, and that whole journey, coming and going, is about 15,000 miles. What do we know about the maker of all these things? We learn that God is an amazing, amazing God. Well, if your grandfather gave you a special piece of furniture that he had made by himself, let's say you have a buffet that's in your bedroom or in your living room, and you say to me, if I come and visit you, Grandpa made this. This thing is, he got it from his father and so on. Well, Grandpa made it, but it's an old buffet. And you would take good care of that piece because it would reflect your love for your grandfather. And you'd want to pass that down from generation to generation. And in the same way, God created the animals and gave them to us. He gave them to man. Our treatment of the animals reflects our respect or lack of respect for God. And we need to treat them right, and we need to treat them well. And we know that Adam took care and took a lot of time to give every animal a distinctive name. We also know that Noah spent 120 years building a boat or an ark with distinctive places for each one of the animals to go because God wanted that to happen. God expects us to be faithful stewards of the animal kingdom that he has entrusted in our care. The second thing I want to look at is that animals are inferior to humans, okay? And you don't realize that sometimes you have to point that out in our society, that animals are not as valuable as people. How many believe that? Oh, preaching to a tough crowd. If one wants him to insult another person, he might compare that person to an animal. For example, if somebody said to you, "You're a hog," that's not a compliment. Or "You're slithery like a snake." Or you're like an elephant, or "You're a rat." Or you're kind of mousy. Are those compliments? Those are not compliments. Because animals are inferior to people, and we take that as an insult. Fred Schnerdley, one night before going to bed, he was sitting there at the table. He wanted a snack, and he was eating a piece of coconut cream pie. And Ethel looked at him and said, "Fred, aren't you getting a little pudgy? You're eating like a pig." That upset Fred. And so he went to bed, and he was mad at Ethel for saying that, but he had this terrible dream. And in the dream, he was walking across the parking lot of a big department store, and he was realizing in his dreams that he was having a hard time walking because he was getting a little pudgy. He'd been reminded of that. And a guy come flying down the aisle in his car, and here he come, and Fred saw him coming, and the guy is looking at him. They made eye contact. He ran right into him. Fred said to the man, "Why did you hit me?" Well, he said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "Did you see me?" He said, I saw you looking right at me. Why didn't you swerve?" The guy said, "Sir, I didn't have enough gas to get around you." I know. It's one of those self-made jokes. Can we have a laugh? But it's not a compliment to be called something like an animal. So in the same way, to make an image of an animal and call it God is a gross insult to the Heavenly Father. And yet throughout history, idols of many ancient cultures were made to look like the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. There was an animal called, the animal in the Old Testament that was called Dagon, that was a fish god, that fell down in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and it broke off its head, broke off its hands on the threshold because God was superior to that. But throughout history, man has made gods to look like animals, and we are not to deify animals in any way. In the book of Exodus, the Hebrew people, after they had received the tables of stone and the law of Moses, and Moses had been gone for a while, what happened? While he was gone, the people thought he was dead or something, and so they made an idol out of the metal that they had, the gold, the earrings, and so on. And he'd only been gone for a few weeks or a few days. And they said to one another in Exodus 32 and verse 4, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Their false worship angered God so much that they were worshiping the image of an idol, in this case a golden calf, that he killed 3,000 people that day. And God was very, very displeased. You know, there's a lot of cultures in our world that are still worshiping animals. A lot of the Hindu cultures, they worship they worship cattle. They worship cows. And many of those cultures are starving. They don't have enough to eat. The people are really going hungry. A lot of poverty there. And I got to thinking, if they would just take those animals that they worship and eat them, they would probably be just fine. The Bible tells us Paul wrote in Romans 1, verse 21, he said, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. And although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for immortals made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles." Well, you know, the Bible does tell us, then teaches us that animals have value. But the scriptures warn us repeatedly that animals are not to be worshiped, nor are they to be considered as valuable as human life. Some will try to suggest that the lives of animals are as valuable as the lives of humans. The idea that man is not superior to animals has been illustrated graphically in the later years, not that long ago, with a group called PETA. PETA, which is a group, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And when they first got started, there was an advertisement that compared the slaughter, what they called the slaughter of cows and chickens for food, to the mass murders committed by Jeffrey Dahmer. They compared those together. And as if killing animals and killing humans were moral equivalents, and they're not. And God makes that very plain in the scriptures. God gave us animals for our food. In fact, in the very beginning, when Adam and Eve were in the garden and they found out that they were naked, God made them skins to wear and so that they would have something to cover their nakedness. So skins came from what? From animals, and God saw the importance of that. A man is more important than animals. When John the Baptist was preaching before Christ came, the forerunner of Christ, the Bible tells us that his garments were camel skin, and what was it that he had girded around his waist? A leather belt. And Jesus went on to say that there's no man ever been greater than the great John the Baptist, born of woman. And so animals had to die for that kind of thing. Well, the Bible would not support those that insist that animals are as valuable as humans and entitled to the same protections. When animals are given too much value, the result is that human life is devalued. Think about that. And that happens. Some of the examples of there's forests that cannot be cut for lumber, for an endangered owl maybe. There are other examples of that where man is trying to worship nature and trying to say just because man was born with a bigger brain does not make him the boss. Well, no, but God has made that very plain. In the book of Acts, there was a man by the name of Cornelius who was a centurion who was, God was going to add him to the church, and he was a Gentile. And of course, the Jewish people did not eat the same things that Gentiles did, but the Lord was trying to make a point with Peter that he was including the Gentiles into his kingdom, the church. So one day, God spoke to Cornelius and told him to go to Peter's house, which was a little journey. And then later on, when Cornelius was almost to his house, Peter went up on the roof and he fell asleep. And God put him into a trance and he showed him something very interesting. He said, as if it were a sheet being let down by its four corners out of heaven, it was full of all kinds of reptiles and four-legged beasts and clean and unclean animals. And God said, rise and eat. And Peter said, Lord, Lord, I'm a Jewish man. I have never eaten unclean animals. And then God said to him, don't tell me what I have made clean that you're going to say is unclean. And he was showing them that they were going to include the Gentiles, but also God was showing to us that animals can be used for food, and they should be used for food. PETA, I had a guy in our church, he said, I want you to belong to my PETA group. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, it's a little different. People for eating tasty animals. And I said, okay, I'll join. Let's have steak. But many are spending incredible amounts of money and a lot of influence, and we are exposing our society to things that are not in the Word of God. And I don't know how long it'll be, but I imagine that some of that, that beef is not good for you. Does that hurt some of the farmers? And so on. And so we go to that. In contrast, in Genesis 1 and verse 27, it reads, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And then the Bible says that a man is the highest of God's physical creation. Did you know that? We are the pinnacle of God's creation. Man alone was created in the image of God. It was a man who Christ loved enough to leave heaven to die for, that we might live with him throughout eternity. When he said, I'll make man in my own image, in our own image, he made us eternal and gave us a spirit that would live forever. The 5th chapter of Mark is an interesting passage. Last week we talked out of the 4th chapter of Mark, and we talked about Jesus stilling the storm. Remember that? And then Jesus was on his way across the lake to an appointment that he had set for himself. As tired as he was, he had fallen asleep in the bow of the ship, or the boat, but he was on his way to meet a man that was a demon-possessed man in the land of the Gadarenes. And he lived in the cemetery, and he ran around, he cut himself, he yelled at night, and so on. And when the boat came up to the shore, this man came, and he said to Jesus, and it was the demons in him that were talking, have you come to destroy us before our time? And so in the course of time, Jesus commanded the demons to come out of this man. And remember the rest of the story. There was a herd of swine, and they were up on a hill, and they were being tended by some men. And they said, can we go into the swine? We don't want to be cast out to have no place to go. And Jesus allowed that. And 2,000 swine ran down that hill and perished. And what does that show? Jesus allowed 2,000 pigs to be destroyed to show that the soul of one man had supreme value over 2,000 hogs. Man is more valuable because we were made in his image. Jesus said, what good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world and yet he forfeits his soul, or is going to be lost? I ran across a story that was written by a guy that I read a lot of his books over the years. I have, by the name of Bob Russell. Some of you have heard of him. And anyway, this story happened one day when he was getting ready for Sunday church. He was standing in his church office looking out the window into the parking lot. It was a big parking lot. And he saw something very unusual. One of his church members, he knew her name. Her name was Karen. She had parked her car sideways in the entrance that led into the big parking lot there. And so he thought, that's interesting. So he stopped and he was watching. And what he saw is that there had been a mother duck that was leading her little ducklings across the yard and across the parking lot. And she was trying to get them up over the curb, but the ducklings were so small they couldn't make the curb. And so she realized that if she didn't do something, these little ducklings were going to run out into the traffic and were going to get hit by cars, and she didn't want to see that happen. Out of her car, and she tried to get them up, tried to show them how to get up, and she got them up over the curb, and they went running after Mom, except one little duckling fell down in the grate, the sewer grate, for the storm sewer. And of course, she looked down there, and there's this little duckling, and she couldn't get him out. She wasn't strong enough to lift the grate. And so Bob was talking, he said he saw this. She was waving at these 3 men walking across the parking lot. And she got their attention, and they came over, and they lifted the grate up, and one guy shinnied down in there. And pretty soon he comes up with the duck in his hand, and she's all excited and gives this duck to her. And by that time, Mama Duck is gone. They can't find her. So he said, the next thing I know, I saw her, she put the duck in her hand and got in the car, and off she went. And he thought, this is going to make a great illustration. I want to use it in one of my sermons. So he got a hold of her and said, let me tell you what I saw from my window and tell me if my story is correct. She said, it's correct except for one part. So when the man got down in the grate, he said there was 2 other ducks down there. There were 3 altogether had fallen down. And he couldn't get the other ducks to come to him. So he called to them, but they would not come. for whatever reason, they were afraid. So he said, I never got those two. There's two other ducks that didn't make it. And I got to thinking about that story, about how that worked, and I thought to myself, if we humans get that distraught over the story of a little duck, can you imagine how God gets distraught when he sees his people and we are lost and we're wandering in the wrong place? And God is the only one who could have sent his son to this earth and come down in the form of Jesus to the sewer of this world. He's the only one that could pull up the grates and go down and try to save us from our sins. In many places in the Word, he says, come unto me, and so on. And we need to understand that that's what he wants us to do, is to come to him. Jesus came to earth, and when his final days on earth, he stood over the city of Jerusalem and he wept, and he said, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you are not willing. But you were not willing. Many are called, but not all listen, and not all come. So if you are here today and you have never come to Christ, I would recommend and I would ask you to come and place your faith in Jesus. We're going to be singing a song that is page 347 in your books, 347. Softly and tender Jesus is calling, just like the man tried to call the ducks and they wouldn't come. He's calling us, and sometimes we're ignoring him as well. Let's stand together as we sing 347.